Hello, hello. It's me again. Hello. How are you? I'll just wait for people to come in and talk about the day and talk about what's going on. Hello, hello. Anybody else? Hello, hello. Anyway, I just thought I'd try and talk about a few different things. The one is about my daughter Sarah, and about my other kids, and they're all doing good. Uh, clearly, the whole situation about Sarah that's been brought to the fact that you know, it's an alleged accident, and we're just gonna let that lie for a while. Take a moment, take a breath, let it, let's relax on it. But there's other things to do, other people to see, and I've got a mic. So hopefully you can hear me. Hello, hello. It looks like an 8 ball, but anyway, uh, haha. Anyway, uh, had wanted to also discuss about the whole issue about traveling. Eventually, I want to go back to traveling. Uh, for now, though, just relaxing during this time of COVID, and the borders have been opened up recently, and it's been announced that you have to do a test before entering back into Canada to make sure that you are COVID free, which is good. um, Basically, I've been doing some drawing. I've been posting my drawings and my pictures online on Instagram and on Facebook, as some of you Facebook users do know. Um, but one of the pictures I did remind myself of, I'll show in a second, is this one. This one is off the coast of Venezuela. And the ex-boyfriend and I had rented a catamaran. This is about going back about 7, 8 years ago, maybe. And we had traveled through uh, Trinidad, going through their ocean, and going through to Venezuela. And we saw this oil rig thing in the middle of this ocean. And it was like, well, yeah, but what is all that water coming from this rig going into back into their river system and into the ocean? Because we had driven from Trinidad going into this river system and found this rig. And I was taken aback because I didn't know what was going on. Largely had no idea about Venezuela's situation, and basically, what we were told was that they had lost their fish, had lost their some of their rights about on the land and on the water. We had met with people who live right in that area of where the river is, and they had reduced their education. They had reduced the transportation to get kids to school. Kids had to walk miles to get to school, and even then, they weren't sure about the kind of education they were going to get. So, part of the reasoning for going down in those places was to provide some school supplies, although minimally it was enough to maybe give them some awareness about that there's other places in the world that they other than Venezuela and other ways to obtain their education, all those kinds of things. Um, and one of the things that I did was that I didn't make myself out to be a more that I knew more than they did. You know, I'm Canadian. We have our own river systems. We have our own oceans, and we too have the same problems in our country as far as water rights and all those things. And you know, that we don't have anywhere to run to anymore. We are the last basis for where we're going to go. We can't run to back into the States. They have their own problems. We can't run to South America. They have their problems. So, you know, we end up in the far north of the Yukon, where they have their water issues. And recently, they had been sent. It was 800,000 gallons of water to the remote areas to so they can survive with the water and things like that. Those issues have been on my mind lately about how to be a part of those things. I've tried to write. I've tried to draw the issues. I've tried to be involved in some means of a chat about being able to bring a part about some of these issues so that more people are more informed about so that they can make better decisions for themselves. I'm not a know-it-all. I know some things. I don't know everything. But that's part of what I have tried to do. Was to make an awareness for people. One of the I'm asked recently about how I had gotten through some of the stuff that I have gotten through, and when my mother was going through her cancers, and I was raising 3 kids at the same time, and I would run back and forth from my home in Langley into New Westminster at the time. Going back many years ago, back in the mid 90s, 1995, 96, around there. I would run back and forth to her house, and with and without the kids, more or less without the kids, because later on in the stages, and they didn't really need to be involved because she was so ill. But there were times where she had been really sick, and one of the times was then I recognized that she was not feeling like herself. So we got some oil, and I rubbed some oil on her chest, and that made her feel better. Giving people some comfort, you know, maybe it's a small meal, or a hug, or just taking the time to listen. And you know, lately I've been accused of not being able to listen very well, but that's because a lot of people have been so negative. And but although this time was negative, but there were some positives in the negatives. And so part of what happened was, and it's kind of tough to talk about, but when my mom was ill, she had decided to get up and go to the bathroom by herself. And I walked alongside with her, and I was able to catch her before she fell. And she collapsed in my arms, and she couldn't walk anymore. And to have your own parent collapse in your arms is a big deal. And it struck me that my mother had lost her dignity and her power about who and what she was, and how she start from the beginning. Basically, what cancer does is allow you to think about how bad you are, how horrible person that you've become, and how could you let this happen to yourself. All the negative thoughts enter the brain and enter in the body and is caught in different parts. Some are in your back, some are in your stomach, some are in your feet. Uh, but basically, that's what cancer does, is that it involves you to think about the negative side of things, and you start believing those negative thoughts, and then, you're like going down the slippery slope. My mother had gone down the slippery slope, and she literally fell into my arms. And at the time, all I could do was to hug her, hold her up, and get some help and get her back into bed, and try and level her confidence with some positives. Give her some good food that isn't negative, and try and give her some positives. When my uncle had bone cancer, he had carrot juice, and carrot juice has all the good properties about carrot juice, and he drank tons of carrot juice to help himself. In my mother's case, she drank water, she drank uh, some juices, um, but she was caught up in this negative fire, and that's part of what happens when you have people who are, somewhat dark in your life. And part of what happens is that you have to rise up from that. And that's part of the reason why people would come in and tell stories for my girls. And there was an elephant story that someone had wrote. Another person had brought in music for them to dance with in front of my mother, so that she can have a happy moment, to watch the kids with. Um, and clearly Sarah and Renee and Kayla, they knew some of those good parts of the story, that they remember playing on at my mom's wheelchair, sitting in the wheelchair and rolling around in the room, etc. But I took those things that I learned through the experience of my mother, and went on and tried to bring that into my home about the positive aspects of life. And I took a stump. It was only about maybe that long, and it had a little nub on the bottom. And I stuck in the dirt and forgot about it. And it grew into a tree, into a big oak tree. And it's still there as far as I know. The other part is that I began to do other positive things, and those changes made it into better. I went to school and tried to become a nurse, and part of what I also learned was that I looked into metaphysical stuff. Carolyn Myss was a teacher down the States, and she had done medical intuitive teachings, and she had learned how to read people's body, in other words. And what she had done was to take that and learn about why people get ill. And she, for herself, she could see uh, body lines in the body, how things laid out in the body, and she could actually see about why people are ill. And could I see that in my mother? Maybe a little bit. Maybe it's more than what I think it is. I'm not sure. Um, could I see that in my dad? To some degree, yeah. Um, but there was nothing I could do about it. I couldn't change their outcomes as much as I tried to tell them, "Oh, hey, this is what I think," but they don't have to agree with my opinion, right? So that's part of what I learned as well. Um, I learned by writing about journaling my feelings about different situations that I had been encountered. Uh, and another outlet I tried was to draw. I do have a Redbubble website you can look to. I do some pictures on Instagram. Um, but looking at the positive things about life, I used to go to White Rock Beach every day for about 7, 8 years, every day, and go and see how the ocean would come up to the shoreline and hear the crashing sounds of the ocean to my ear, and that made me feel better. Um, to hear music was also a thing. My dad was in theater, so he did lots and lots of shows, and hearing music helped me. Uh, the other part is growing up back in the 70s, I used to ride my bike a lot. I still have a bike. I don't ride as often as I used to. Um, but those are the type of things that help me. So just because someone didn't appreciate the artwork or the bike riding or the music that I looked at, or didn't appreciate my drawings, didn't appreciate what I wrote, didn't appreciate anything that I had ever tried to accomplish, um, that's too bad for them, right? So got married and had 3 kids. Um, and they are appreciated. And I love them dearly. And they mean a whole lot to me. And now I'm a grandparent, and they are going to be coming up soon. And there'll be another generation of having to learn these things as well. So, doing the things that are good for you and help along your path are the ways that I have managed to do it. Uh, but, as far as I know, oh, one other thing. This is a cinnamon stick, and cinnamon has always been in apple pies. Well, that's one other thing I used to bake is apple pies or apple fritters. Not apple fritters, apple. I tried to make strudel a couple of times. And basically, the smell of cinnamon in a home helps make you feel better. The smell of cinnamon in a house is a wonderful smell. The smells of baked cookies makes you feel good. Uh, what other things that make you feel good? Um, Heating pads. Sometimes I get sore and get a heating pad, and that makes me feel better. I've been more because of COVID and because of other things. Uh, I've decided to remain in my home to during the good time of COVID. So I'm not giving my kids or my granddaughter the COVID. Um, and I've been more or less been based here in my home, and that's been fine. I'm used to small quarters. I was on a catamaran for on and off for over 3 or 4 years there. So I'm used to smaller spaces. So it's okay. And, I've had it pretty good. You know, I've been managed to travel. I was married and had kids and saw different shows. My dad had done uh, the most. What's your dad's favorite show? Ah, Brigadoon. I know he loved Brigadoon. I loved Brigadoon as well. It was a story about how a town wakes up every 100 years, and how they change their outlook every 100 years about their little town and their village. And one part of the story is that two guys discover this town in the middle of nowhere in Scotland, and they try and um, be involved in this little town. And when it's time to go to bed, when it's time for the show to be, I'm really nervous today. When it was time for them to leave, the town had gone to sleep, and they had to leave the town. So, but they wanted to go back. One of them wanted to go back and find his love that he found in this village, and with the town wake up, and they did. And part of what happened was um, they had a character in the show named Harry Beaton, and Harry would cause some grief for Fiona, and he was fairly miserable with her, and he had decided to get really mean with her. And eventually, Harry was chased down by the other villagers and was chased away. And eventually, he was caught and then was killed in the show. And then the town got to replug into itself and to become the Brigadoon all over again. And that's part of what rising above is being able to rise above these times and to move forward. And that's what I'm trying to do too, is to rise above this. Another show he had done was called Cabaret. Back in 1972, Joel Grey did a show on Broadway about Brigadoon. And in that show, they had the Nazis rising up and trying to infiltrate in Germany and all that. And Joel Grey had sung the song, "Welcome, bienvenue, welcome. Enchanté, enchanté, enchanté." And that story is about Germany, about how they had their times, and I think that's worth a show looking at to get some sense about where things are. Uh, you know, I, I may be all over the place today, but I don't see anybody in the chat room. So I'm going to end it here. And you guys have a good day, and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.